Everyone stopped and stared when a woman in grease-stained coveralls gently placed her hand on the hood of a gleaming red Ferrari parked in front of a luxury hotel. Moments later, a furious billionaire stormed outside, shouting for her to back away. He saw only her skin color and the dirt under her nails, not the brilliance behind her eyes. But within minutes, his arrogance would be humbled, his assumptions shattered. Because sometimes, the person you look down on turns out to be the only one who can lift you up. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. The polished gleam of the Ferrari SF90 Stradale caught the sunlight like a spotlight on center stage. Parked outside the Avalon Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the rare supercar looked more like an art installation than a mode of transportation. Its crimson body shimmered with a rich metallic glaze, sleek lines drawing stares from every passerby like a magnet pulling iron filings. It wasn't just expensive, it was untouchable. At least, that's what the man who owned it believed. Zoe Langston didn't see it that way. She was late to meet her friend Maya for lunch, cutting across Fifth Avenue, her boots scuffing against the pavement, a grease-streaked satchel slung over one shoulder. Her orange coveralls were unzipped at the waist, the top half tied around her hips to reveal a fitted black t-shirt stained at the collar with the faint outline of motor oil. Her natural coils were tucked beneath a navy bandana, and her hands, though clean, bore the faint calluses and tiny cuts of someone who worked with machines more than makeup. But all of that faded from her mind the moment she saw the car. She stopped in her tracks like she'd spotted a ghost. No, not a ghost, something holier. A 2023 SF90 Stradale, she whispered, almost reverently. Zoe had rebuilt Ferraris before, even rare editions, but this was on another level. The spoiler wasn't stock, the rims had been refitted. The brake calipers were gold-plated, and she swore she could see hints of diamond carbon fiber in the hood vents. Whoever owned this beast had money, taste, and access. She couldn't help herself. Zoe stepped closer, completely unaware of the hotel doorman's raised eyebrow or the group of tourists snapping photos nearby. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the subtle tweaks, her brain already mentally reverse-engineering the setup. Then, as naturally as breathing, she reached out and laid her hand softly on the car's hood right above the front grille where the V8 engine would rest beneath. Warm, recently driven, and from the faint vibration she could tell something was off. A barely there rattle near the front strut suggested the suspension was slightly misaligned. Probably aftermarket upgrades poorly calibrated for New York's notoriously rough roads. She ran her fingers along the front, her touch feather-light, like a musician caressing the strings of a beloved instrument. "Oh my God, are you serious?" The voice wasn't just loud, it was sharp like a blade unsheathed midair. Zoe froze, hand still on the hood. She turned slowly, instinctively straightening her back, like a soldier preparing to stand at attention. The crowd had gone silent. Conversations, laughter, even the shuffle of foot traffic all evaporated. Striding out of the hotel lobby like a storm cloud in human form was a tall man in a navy Tom Ford suit, hair perfectly combed, jaw clenched so tightly it looked carved from marble. His walk was aggressive, his presence unmistakable. Every inch of him screamed money, power, entitlement. Nathaniel Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Dynamics, Forbes cover model, self-made billionaire. A man who controlled tech patents like a king commanding armies. And the owner of the Ferrari she had just dared to touch. He stopped 5 feet from her, his ice blue eyes locked on her brown ones. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked. "Are you out of your mind?" Zoe blinked, startled by the volume and venom. Still, she dropped her hand and took a breath. "I'm sorry," she said calmly. "I wasn't." "You weren't what?" he cut in, stepping closer. "You weren't trying to scratch $500,000 worth of handcrafted engineering with your greasy fingers?" A few gasps from the gathering crowd. Zoe's nostrils flared slightly, her hands going to her sides, not in aggression, but in control. "I didn't scratch anything," she replied, tone even but firm. "I was just admiring the build. It's a stunning machine." "Oh, you were admiring it," he said with mock realization, the sarcasm curling around his words like smoke. Is that what we're calling it now? You don't admire a car like this by pawing at it in the middle of a public sidewalk. I wasn't pawing, Zoe said. Whatever it was completely inappropriate. Do you even understand what this car is? This is a custom-order SF90 Stradale, one of only 5 in the entire country. Do you have any idea how delicate this paint job is? Do you even know what carbon ceramic brakes are? Or are you just another... He stopped himself, just short of a word that hovered on the edge of something uglier than embarrassment. Zoe tilted her head. Another what? Nathaniel's lips thinned. People were filming now. Several phones pointed directly at them. The doorman shifted uncomfortably. The tension was suffocating. Zoe could feel the judgment on their faces. To them, she was the problem. The woman in dirty work clothes daring to touch something she couldn't possibly understand. Zoe took a slow step forward. She didn't raise her voice, didn't lash out. I know exactly what this car is, she said. It's got a twin-turbocharged V8 with 3 electric motors, almost 0 horsepower. From the way it's vibrating under the hood, you probably pushed it too hard on a cold engine and threw off the calibration. The strut alignment's off, by the way, probably from the potholes on 6th Avenue. Might want to get that checked before the suspension eats itself. Nathaniel stared at her, stunned. For just a moment, the fury slipped into confusion. And if you're wondering how I know, Zoe continued, it's because I'm a certified hybrid systems engineer with over a decade of hands-on experience. I've rebuilt more Ferraris than you've probably driven. Silence, then laughter. But not from the crowd. From Nathaniel. It was a sharp, biting sound. A laugh not born from amusement, but from disbelief. You're a mechanic, he said flatly, as if the word were synonymous with liar. You expect me to believe that? I don't care what you believe, Zoe answered. But if you don't check that engine soon, your car's going to be a 500 paperweight. She stepped back, lifting her satchel over her shoulder. Nathaniel opened his mouth to retort when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Then his eyes narrowed. It was from Montclair Performance Garage, his service provider. He answered it without breaking eye contact. Mr. Westbrook, came a frantic voice on the other end. This is Anthony from Montclair. We're detecting hybrid instability in the SF90 you left idling earlier. System error flags are popping up on our remote diagnostics. You need a recalibration immediately. Nathaniel blinked. What? Critical thresholds are spiking. You could blow your powertrain if you drive it more than 2 blocks. We're dispatching our specialist now, Zoe Langston. She's the only one on the East Coast certified to handle the SF90's hybrid firmware. Nathaniel's mouth opened slightly. He looked at Zoe. Zoe looked right back, calm and composed. I believe, she said, you're expecting me. A ripple passed through the crowd. A few people lowered their phones. The silence was heavy, but this time, the weight of shame wasn't on her. Zoe turned and began walking toward the idling Ferrari. I'll need access to your garage, she said over her shoulder, and maybe next time consider checking the engine before yelling at someone who could save it. Nathaniel said nothing. His Ferrari hummed gently behind her. His ego, on the other hand, had stalled completely. Long before she stood on a Manhattan sidewalk, challenging a billionaire's arrogance, Zoe Langston learned how to listen to machines before people ever learned to listen to her. Brooklyn, 2002. The sun had barely risen when a 7-year-old Zoe climbed into her father's garage barefoot, in overalls 3 sizes too big, with an afro so wild it nearly brushed the low-hanging light bulb. The scent of engine oil and rusted metal should have made her wrinkle her nose. Instead, she breathed it in like fresh air. Her father, Leon Langston, glanced up from under the raised hood of a battered 1992 Toyota Camry. He was built like an oak tree, sturdy, grounded, and unshakable. His deep baritone echoed through the space like a jazz bass line. Morning, Zozo. What are you doing up? I heard the ratchet, she said simply, padding closer, eyes wide. Can I help? Leon chuckled. This car's older than you, baby girl. She don't need help. She needs a miracle. Zoe stepped closer, placing her small hand on the bumper. She's just tired. That was the first time Leon looked at her not just as a daughter, but as an apprentice. From that moment forward, Zoe wasn't just a little girl hanging around the shop, she was a mechanic in training. Over the next decade, while other kids played house or practiced TikTok dances, Zoe rebuilt carburetors, changed brake pads, and could diagnose a misfire by ear before most licensed techs even popped the hood. Her father would beam with pride, calling her his magic hands. But the world outside the garage wasn't as enchanted. At her public high school in Crown Heights, Zoe was a curiosity. Too smart to be ignored, too different to be accepted. While guidance counselors pushed her toward nursing or teaching, she submitted essays about torque vectors and combustion ratios. In science fairs, boys stole her ideas and took credit. Teachers praised the boys. Even in automotive vocational classes where she outperformed every male student, she was constantly second-guessed. "Hey, Zoe," one boy snickered during a group project. "You sure you didn't copy that engine diagram from Google?" "No," she snapped. "But you probably copied your personality from a bad sitcom." By her senior year, Zoe stopped trying to prove anything to anyone, except herself. She graduated top of her class and won a partial scholarship to the Manhattan Institute of Automotive Technologists School, where most of the student body didn't look like her and few instructors believed someone like her would last. On her first day, an older white professor looked at her coveralls and asked if she was there to clean the machines. "No," she replied. "I'm here to rewire them." The struggle didn't stop after school. While male classmates were hired at high-end repair shops straight out of graduation, Zoe was passed over again and again. "Your resume's impressive," one hiring manager told her during an interview, "but our clients might not respond well to a woman under the hood. No offense." Zoe nodded politely, then built her own empire. It started with a Craigslist ad, a second-hand van, and a folding toolbox her father gave her before he passed. Washington Auto Restoration, named for her mother's maiden name, began as a mobile service for stranded vehicles. She worked 16-hour days, rain or shine. No task was too dirty, no car too busted. The van became a garage, the garage became a business. And by the time she turned 28, Zoe had a clientele list that included 2 NBA players, a Grammy-winning singer, and a city councilwoman who offered to help fund her expansion. But none of it came easy. She had to be twice as good, twice as prepared, and 3 times as patient. There were nights she wanted to quit. Nights when a customer would look past her and ask for the man in charge. Nights when bank loan officers smiled at her ambition and denied her anyway. Nights when she lay in her tiny apartment above the garage, staring at the ceiling fan spinning endlessly, wondering if the world would ever stop seeing her as a girl in coveralls instead of the genius under the grease. But then she'd remember the sound of her father's voice as he held a socket wrench out to her for the first time. "You got magic in your hands, Zozo, the kind nobody can buy or fake. They'll doubt you, ignore you, underestimate you, but don't ever let them take away your magic." 3 years ago, that magic saved a $2 million Bugatti from going up in flames after 2 European specialists failed to fix its hybrid cooling module. The client never saw her face, but they knew the name Zoe Langston afterward. 2 years ago, she rebuilt a Ferrari 812 Superfast's gearbox blind-only, using thermal imaging and vibration analytics. And last year, she earned her Master Technician certification in both EV and hybrid systems, becoming one of only a dozen black women in the US to hold dual certs at that level. Still, she didn't care about the accolades. Her dream wasn't fame. It was impact. Zoe dreamed of creating an institute where young women of color could learn high-performance automotive engineering without being talked over, shut down, or pushed out. A space where hands were stained with grease, but minds were lifted with brilliance. She kept a photo of her and her father above her workbench, him holding her at age 10, both of them beaming, both covered in oil. Underneath, scrawled in faded Sharpie, it read, "Machines are honest. People have to work at it." That was Zoe's creed. Machines don't lie. They break, but they don't betray. They tell you what they need if you're willing to listen. People? People shouted before listening, judged before learning, screamed at strangers before asking names. Like the man in the Tom Ford suit. Back in the present, Zoe stood just outside the Avalon Hotel's underground parking garage. Nathaniel Westbrook's prized Ferrari was being lowered into position by a sleek car elevator humming beneath fluorescent lights. She leaned against the pillar, arms crossed, eyes distant. "Magic hands," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. She pulled her gloves from her satchel and slid them on. Each finger tug was deliberate, focused. Because in just a few minutes, she wasn't just fixing a car. She was reminding herself who she'd always been. And proving again that brilliance doesn't come wrapped in status or skin color. Sometimes it comes in coveralls. Nathaniel Westbrook didn't just walk into rooms she arrived. At 39, he'd long since mastered the art of quiet dominance, tailored suits, watch dials worth more than most mortgages, and the kind of calm that made people nervous. Every meeting, every negotiation, every glance down his nose had been rehearsed into a performance of control. But beneath the sculpted jawline and cold blue stare was something no one ever saw. Fear. It didn't look like fear, it looked like obsession, it looked like perfection, but at its root, Nathaniel's entire life was built on one trembling foundation, the fear of not being enough. His childhood hadn't been glamorous. Raised in Connecticut by a father who believed emotion was a flaw and a mother who equated silence with discipline, Nathaniel grew up in a house where success was the only language spoken. Dinner conversations were centered around performance reviews and Ivy League rankings. There were no bedtime stories-only briefings. By 12, he was competing with college students in robotics tournaments. By 16, he'd already coded an early prototype of what would become one of the foundational AI models for secure data encryption work that got him early admission to MIT and $2 million in venture capital funding before he could legally drink. And by 22, he dropped out of grad school to form Westbrook Dynamics, a tech firm built on security, speed, and silent domination of every market it touched. Nathaniel built an empire one algorithm at a time, but with every milestone came a new layer of insulation between him and the world. Success wasn't just his armor, it was his prison. His penthouse sat 42 stories above Manhattan, a temple of glass and concrete, overlooking the skyline like a king observing his kingdom. Each corner was precisely measured. The marble was Italian. The shelves were color-graded. The air always smelled like cedar and ambition. But there were no photos on the walls. No family portraits, no childhood memories. Only trophies, awards, press features, stock certificates, and his cars. Oh, his cars. In the private showroom garage that took up half the floor, Nathaniel kept his most prized possessions: a Lamborghini Aventador, a McLaren Pone, a 1960, two Shelby Cobra, a Porsche 918 Spider, and the crown jewel, his custom-built Ferrari SF90 Stradale. He didn't drive them often, not in the traditional sense. He curated them, worshipped them, cleaned them with a reverence usually reserved for altars. Because unlike people, cars made sense. They followed rules, math, physics, predictability. They didn't betray you, they didn't die suddenly or leave you with silence. Not like his father. Nathaniel had been 25 when his father collapsed on a treadmill, heart exploding mid-stride. The man who taught him to never show weakness died gasping on polished gym floors with no one there to hear his final thoughts. Nathaniel found out through a voicemail from the family lawyer. The funeral was tasteful, closed casket, no eulogies. At the wake, his mother looked at him once and said only, "He would have been disappointed you didn't finish your PhD." That night, Nathaniel made two decisions. He would never allow himself to be emotionally vulnerable again. He would never be disappointed in his own reflection. And so began the obsession. Not just with winning, but with controlling every element of his life. Routine became ritual. He woke at 4:45 a.m. Every day, ran precisely 3.2 miles, drank the same protein shake, and read exactly 10 pages of a new business or science text each morning. He refused to eat at restaurants that didn't meet a Michelin threshold. He hadn't been on a real date in 4 years. The last woman he'd truly connected with left after 3 months, accusing him of treating her like a marketing campaign. She wasn't wrong. Emotions made him twitch. Vulnerability felt like walking into traffic. So he avoided both. Until the Ferrari. That car was different. When Nathaniel commissioned it from Ferrari's tailor-made program, he requested things they'd never done before: custom braking software, unique airflow geometry, even a sound-modulated cabin that altered engine acoustics based on his breathing patterns. It was the ultimate fusion of control and creativity. A machine that hummed when he was calm and roared when he was angry. It was, in his mind, the only thing in his life that understood him. So when he stepped out of the Avalon Hotel that afternoon and saw a strangera woman with her hand on it, touching it like it belonged to her, it wasn't just a violation, it was blasphemy. The rage that exploded from him wasn't about the paint or the engine. It was about the disruption. In a single instant, that stranger dressed in coveralls, hair tied back, unbothered by status had broken into the fortress he built around himself. She didn't ask permission. She didn't flinch. And when she looked back at him and diagnosed the car like it was second nature, something inside him cracked. He didn't know it yet, but the crack wasn't weakness. It was a window. A window into something terrifying. That maybe the person he'd become wasn't actually a man, just a system. Like an engine with no soul. Now, in the underground parking garage, Nathaniel stood near his car, watching that same woman's Zopal diagnostic equipment from her satchel as if she lived in spaces like this. She wasn't performing. She was home. And for the first time in a long, long while, Nathaniel Westbrook didn't feel like the smartest person in the room. He felt like the one who needed to learn. But he didn't know how to say that. Not yet. All he knew was that she had touched more than his Ferrari. She touched something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. Possibility. The hum of the underground garage was broken only by the occasional drip of water from the overhead pipes and the soft beeping of Zoe's diagnostic scanner. The Ferrari sat like a panther coiled, beautiful and dangerously close to breakdown. Zoe had the hood open, gloves on, and her portable tablet mounted to the windshield. Her eyes flicked between readings like a surgeon monitoring vitals. She tapped in commands faster than most people could type a sentence. The hybrid interface was out of sync by 11.8%, just as she'd suspected. Nathaniel stood off to the side, arms crossed, jaw tight not out of defiance anymore, but in the way someone locks their knees when they realize the ground under them isn't as stable as they thought. Zoe hadn't spoken to him since she stepped into the garage. She didn't need to. The car was speaking, and she was the only one who understood it. But the momentary silence shattered when the screech of elevator doors opening echoed through the garage. Then came the boots. 2 uniformed NYPD officers descended the steps like they were storming a drug den. Zoe Langston? The taller one barked. She didn't even look up. Busy. If you're here about the parking ticket I paid last week, take it up with my assistant. Ma'am, the second officer said, sterner, you're under investigation for tampering with a high-value private vehicle. Zoe's hands froze mid-motion. She slowly turned, eyes narrowing. Come again? Nathaniel stepped forward. What is this? We received a call, the first cop said, tapping his notepad. Anonymous report said a woman matching her description was seen trying to interfere with a Ferrari outside the Avalon, possible vandalism or attempted theft. Zoe's eyes darted toward Nathaniel, jaw clenched, his mouth open but no words came out. Her name, he finally managed, is Zoe Langston. She's not tampering, she's repairing. She's been contracted to calibrate the hybrid interface. Do you have documentation of that arrangement? The shorter cop asked. Nathaniel blinked. What? A contract, a work order, anything official. Zoe's expression turned into steel. You're asking him for proof of what I do? You walked into a garage where I'm actively fixing the engine, and the question is whether I belong here. The taller cop stepped closer. Miss Langston, if you just come with us, we can clear this up at the station. Oh, you want to clear it up with zip ties and holding cells now? Nathaniel spoke again, this time louder. She's working for me. I can make some calls. But Zoe raised her hand to silence him. Her voice was calm, controlled, like a wire pulled tight but not yet snapped. Let me guess, she said. You got a call saying a black woman in coveralls was messing with a fancy car in a rich part of town, and instead of asking a single damn question, you came to haul her off like she's a threat. The taller cop sighed. Ma'am, this doesn't have to be a scene. Zoe stepped back, pulled a folded document from her back pocket, and handed it over. State license, hybrid and EV specialist. My certification number is registered with Ferrari's US database. Go ahead, call them. I'm on the approved service list for this VIN. The officers hesitated, glancing between her and the document. Zoe turned to Nathaniel, her voice laced with venom. You going to say something, or are you just going to stand there and let them take me away from your broken engine like it's not your mess? Nathaniel swallowed hard. Then he finally moved. He stepped between Zoe and the officers, hands raised. She's not going anywhere, he said. I'm calling my legal counsel. This is absurd. She was brought here because of her expertise. The officers shared a look. The taller one handed back the license with a grunt. We'll verify this, but if we find anything off, we'll be back. They turned and exited as quickly as they'd arrived. Silence fell again. Zoe didn't move. Nathaniel turned toward her slowly. Zoe, don't. She wiped her face with her sleeve, not because she was crying, but because rage had its own kind of sweat. You didn't say a damn thing when they first walked in. You hesitated. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from the deep humiliation of déjà vu. Nathaniel dropped his gaze. You hesitated, she repeated, voice quieter now, because somewhere in your head, some part of you wondered if they might be right. No, Nathaniel said quickly. I was shocked. Welcome to my world. She turned back to the car. You want the calibration fixed? Fine. But after this, you don't get to speak to me unless it's through my assistant. You don't get access to my time, my energy, or my respect. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but then closed it again. Because she was right. The next hour was brutal. Not because of the work Zoe had handled more complex systems blindfolded, but because of the storm inside her chest. She connected the Ferrari's onboard computer to her programming tablet and initiated a firmware override. A miscommunication between the car's electric motors and the fuel injector controller was causing feedback loops, the vibration and warning codes. She worked like a machine, faster than any tech on Nathaniel's staff had ever managed. She dismantled part of the powertrain interface and rewired a grounding sensor in 15 minutes. Nathaniel watched from the side, silent, useless. Zoe didn't look at him once. When she finally slammed the hood down, the Ferrari purred like a tiger soothed by the hands of a healer. Diagnostics. Cleared. System stability. Stow percent. Engine health. Optimal. Zoe pulled off her gloves, shoved them into her satchel, and tapped the final code into her tablet. Nathaniel stepped forward. It's running perfectly. Of course it is, she said. That's what happens when you trust a real expert instead of assuming competence has a dress code. He flinched. I never should have hesitated. That moment defined everything, she cut in. There it was, the truth. Brutal, simple, undeniable. Nathaniel Westbrook, the man who demanded flawlessness, had just been exposed, not by failure, but by hesitation in the face of prejudice. She packed her things. He watched her go. The engine roared, but the silence between them said more. And as Zoe walked out of that garage, she didn't look back. She didn't need to, because she knew that fixing a machine was easy. Fixing people, that was the real challenge. The garage had never felt so quiet. Nathaniel stood with his back against the cold glass wall, arms folded tight, his expression unreadable, but his mind was racing. The Ferrari, freshly calibrated and humming like a tiger in meditation, sat in the center of his private sanctuary. And Zoe Langston, despite everything, was still here. Still working. Despite the humiliation, despite the cops, despite him. She could have walked out, should have. But there she was, rolling up her sleeves again, not for him, but for the machine, for the work, for the principle of excellence. Nathaniel didn't speak. He didn't dare interrupt. Instead, he watched. Really watched. Zoe moved like she belonged there. Her steps were deliberate, her motions exact. Every tool she touched, she used with the kind of care a concert pianist uses with ivory keys. Not rushed, not cocky, just certain. She removed the Ferrari's underpanel in a smooth, fluid motion and set it aside with a care most people reserved for priceless art. Her fingers danced across a diagnostic pad as she ran real-time analysis on the hybrid converter. It wasn't just about knowing what to do, it was about feeling what to do. Nathaniel was used to seeing expertise in boardrooms, in code, in markets. But this was a different kind of intelligence. Physical, sensory, beautiful, and humbling. He didn't even realize he was holding his breath until Zoe glanced up from her workbench. "What?" she asked. Not harsh, not soft, just neutral. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "You're fast!" She turned back to the diagnostic screen. "Not fast, just practiced." "And practiced means what? Thousands of hours?" She didn't look up this time. Thousands of hours. Hundreds of failures. Dozens of men thinking they know better. And one father who believed in me before I believed in myself. Nathaniel didn't know what to say to that. So he said nothing. Instead, he followed her across the garage as she opened the rear power compartment and reached for the secondary controller board. "You used to work in Brooklyn, right?" he asked carefully. Zoe glanced sideways. "That on my resume, or did you run a background check?" "I remember hearing about a woman rebuilding a Bugatti's thermal cooling unit in 3 hours," he said. "They said she did it solo, no assistance, just intuition and guts." "That was me," Zoe said without pausing. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. "I thought it was a rumor." "It usually is when a black woman's behind something exceptional." He felt the truth of that statement like a blow to the ribs. Zoe was already crawling underneath the car again. From his vantage point, Nathaniel could see her eyes narrowed in concentration, her lips moving silently as she counted voltage pulses and confirmed circuit sync. Her tablet was synced to the Ferrari's internal OS, and every few seconds she'd nod at the readings before adjusting a screw or reconnecting a sensor. It wasn't just competence. It was artistry. Something stirred in Nathaniel's chest. Not attraction, not yet. Something older than that. Something he hadn't felt since his early days as an engineer. Back when he still pulled all-nighters, not for mergers or investors, but for the joy of solving impossible puzzles. That's what Zoe was doing now. Solving. Understanding. Mastering. She wasn't just fixing the car. She was speaking its language. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Westbrook realized he was the student in the room, not the master. "How did you learn all this?" he asked quietly, careful not to break the rhythm of her work. Zoe's voice came from under the car, muffled but steady. "Trial, error, curiosity, and because every time someone said I couldn't, I made sure I did." "You make it look effortless." "Nothing about this is effortless," she replied, sliding out on the creeper. "It's just familiar. This," she gestured to the car, "this makes sense. The rest of the world, not so much." Nathaniel stepped forward, hands at his sides. "And people like me?" Zoe looked him squarely in the eye. "People like you are the reason I had to get this good." Silence fell again, heavy and honest. Nathaniel wanted to argue, to say he wasn't like the others, but he knew that wasn't true no yet, not after today. Not after the look in her eyes when the police showed up and he stood frozen, useless in a moment that demanded action. So he didn't argue. He just listened, watched, learned. And when Zoe finally stood, stretching her back and wiping sweat from her brow, she nodded once. "Systems fully synced, calibrated to Ferrari specs and my own overlay. You'll get better throttle response now, no more vibration." Nathaniel looked at the Ferrari, then back at her. I've had 6 engineers touch that car in the last 8 months, he said. None of them ever made it purr like this. Zoe shrugged. They were listening with their ears. I was listening with my hands. He moved toward her without realizing it, then caught himself and stopped. Zoe, he began, I'm not good at apologizing. I don't know how to. She raised a hand. I'm not interested in hearing it right now, she said plainly. Let your actions speak for you. He nodded, slowly. That's fair. She grabbed her satchel and packed away her tools, neat and efficient. You'll get an invoice by morning, she said, and I'd prefer not to be contacted directly again unless it's an emergency. Nathaniel hesitated, then offered quietly, I don't think I've ever seen anyone do what you just did. Not like that. Not with that much grace. Zoe slung her bag over her shoulder and met his gaze one last time. Maybe that's because you've been looking in the wrong direction your whole life. She turned and walked away, boots echoing on the concrete, leaving Nathaniel and his perfectly calibrated Ferrari behind. But something in him knew deep down the real calibration had only just begun. The video hit Twitter at 6:07 p.m. By 6:42, it had over 300 views. By 7:15, the hashtags were trending. Ferrari fiasco, touch of genius, Westbrook meltdown, Zoe Langston. It started with a 15-second clip. A woman in stained coveralls gently placing her hand on the hood of a luxury Ferrari, the billionaire CEO screaming at her to back away before she damaged something she didn't understand. His voice, unmistakable, cold, arrogant, clipped with entitlement and something more dangerous dismissiveness. But what made the video go viral wasn't the confrontation. It was what happened next. The calm way she corrected him. The diagnostic she gave on the spot. The fact that hours later, Westbrook's own garage confirmed every word she'd said. Twitter exploded. This woman diagnosed a $500K Ferrari by touch. I'm putting her name on my resume. At Tech Savant NYC, Nathaniel Westbrook just got ratioed by a mechanic who deserves her own TED Talk. At Culture Critic, this right here is why black women have to work 3 times harder to be heard. Zoe Langston is an engineer, not a prop. At Blavity Auto, screenshots flooded the internet. Zoe crouched beside the car, her expression focused, her eyes calculating, the image of a woman not just surviving in a male-dominated space, but commanding it. Zoe didn't even know she was viral until she got home. Her phone was buzzing on and off the entire subway ride back to Queens. At first, she thought Marcus had sent another reminder about tomorrow's appointments. But by the time she stepped into her studio apartment above Washington Auto Restoration, she had 47 missed calls, 109 unread texts, and more email notifications than she'd seen in a month. She tossed her satchel down, cracked open her laptop, and there she was. On every feed. The mystery mechanic who shut down a billionaire with knowledge, grace, and zero patience for disrespect. She stared at the screen for a long minute, blinking slowly. Oh no, she muttered. What the hell? Across the city, Nathaniel sat in his glass-walled office, staring at the same video, only his version came with a long email chain from his public relations team, several voicemails from board members, and one very angry message from his personal attorney. Subject line: You're trending, and not in a good way. He didn't hit play again. He didn't need to. He'd seen it 10 times already. He remembered every word, every expression, every angle of Zoe's calm confidence and his unfiltered rage. He looked exactly like the kind of man he'd always sworn he wasn't. Detached, elitist, condescending, prejudiced, and worse, silent when she needed him to speak. His phone buzzed. Again. Another missed call from Harrison Blackwell, his oldest friend and chairman of the board. Nathaniel didn't answer. He wasn't ready to hear Harrison tell him to clean it up or donate to something diverse. Instead, he opened Twitter and typed, I owe the world an apology. But first, I owe one woman something more. At Zoe Langston, you were right. I was wrong. About the car. About the moment. About you. I'm listening now. NW. He hit send before PR could stop him. Zoe saw the tweet while brushing her teeth. She froze mid-rinse. Stared. Rinsed. Then, La Feda single sharp sound. Oh, now you're listening, she muttered, scrolling the replies. To her surprise, most of the responses weren't angry. They were shocked, curious, a few even hopeful. Did Nathaniel Westbrook just admit he was wrong? This might be the first time I've seen a billionaire say sorry without hiding behind lawyers. Plot twist. Respect. We need a follow-up interview. Get at Zoe Langston on the record. Within hours, Zoe had 4 media requests in her inbox. One from The Verge, one from Forbes, one from AutoWorld, and shockingly an invite from Good Morning America. Marcus called at 1:14 a.m. You saw it, right? He asked, half whispering like it was a secret. I saw it. This is big, Zoe. Like, change your life big. Zoe sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the tweet again. Feels like a setup. No, it's a spotlight, and maybe, for once, it's pointed in the right direction. The next morning, Zoe walked into her garage to find a line of reporters outside and 2 clients already waiting with their engines running. By noon, she'd received 3 offers to partner on new auto shops, a scholarship pitch for teaching girls STEM through hands-on mechanic training, and a 6-figure licensing deal to publish a book on hybrid diagnostics. And somewhere in the middle of it, a la flower delivery. No name. Just a note. You fixed more than my Ferrari, NW. She rolled her eyes and tossed the card into the trash. Meanwhile, Westbrook Dynamics stock had dropped 2.3%. Not because the market thought the company was failing, but because its CEO was now a liability. In a hastily called board meeting, Harrison paced the conference room, waving a printout of Zoe's viral photo. You need to fix this, he snapped, or step aside until it blows over. Nathaniel leaned forward. Step aside because I had a moment of ignorance and now I'm being human? Because you showed it, Harrison barked. Publicly, loudly, and now every tech journalist wants to know why your executive board doesn't include a single black woman. Nathaniel blinked. It doesn't? Harrison threw his hands up. You don't even know? Nathaniel stood. Then maybe that's where I start. That night, Zoe sat on the roof of her building, her laptop open, the skyline glittering like a question mark in the distance. She wasn't angry anymore. She was ready. Ready to change the conversation. Not just about what women of color could do under the hood, but about who got to define excellence in the first place. She opened a blank document. At the top, she typed, The Zoe Standard, a new framework for equity in engineering spaces. She smiled to herself. Let the world keep watching. She had work to do. It had been 6 days since the incident. 6 days since the world had turned Zoe Langston's name into a banner of empowerment and Nathaniel Westbrook's into a synonym for arrogant blindness. 6 days of headlines, interviews, think pieces, think rebuttals to think pieces, and awkward apologies from men who were suddenly committed to listening. Zoe had taken exactly 1 interview with AutoWorld Weekly, not because they offered the biggest platform, but because they'd been the first to reach out and the only ones who asked about her work, not her race or what it felt like to clap back. The rest, she ignored, politely. She wasn't here for the clout, she was here to build something. That morning, she was back in her shop, sleeves rolled up, arms buried inside a Jaguar's misfiring transmission. She had music playing an old Lauryn Hill mixtape and grease on her cheek, the way she liked it. Then she heard the knock. It wasn't the usual knock. Clients knocked with hesitation, reporters with nervous urgency. This knock was confident, sharp. She wiped her hands and swung the garage door open. There he was. Nathaniel Westbrook, in a gray jacket and black turtleneck like he'd been styled by an apology consultant. Zoe folded her arms. Did you get lost on your way to humility? Nathaniel smiled just barely. Can I come in? That depends. Are you here to lecture, apologize, or offer me another flower arrangement? No flowers this time, he said, just a conversation. Zoe stood aside. You've got 5 minutes. He walked in slowly, taking in the space. The vintage signage, the organized chaos, the smell of sweat and metal and oil. It wasn't sterile like his own garage. It was lived in. It had soul. This is impressive, he said. Efficient, warm. Zoe didn't respond, just nodded toward a metal stool near the workbench. He sat, and then pulled out a slim folder from his bag. She raised an eyebrow. Please don't tell me that's a cease and desist. I'd hate to have to roast you in court. He placed it on the bench between them. It's an offer. For? A partnership, investment, expansion. I've reviewed your proposal to Zoe Standard. I think it's revolutionary, and I think I can help make it real. Zoe stared at the folder, then at him. Go on. Nathaniel shifted slightly, the stool squeaking beneath him. I want to fund your institute. Fully, no strings attached. You build the curriculum, hire who you want, launch when and how you see fit. I'll give you space in the Westbrook Innovation Center on the top floor. Not in the basement. Full autonomy. I don't want to own it. I just want it to exist. Zoe blinked. Not because she was surprised by the offer, but because of how calm she felt hearing it. It was the kind of offer she dreamed of for years. But her gut told her to slow down. Why? She asked. Nathaniel met her gaze. Because you were right. About the car, about the world, about me. And because I want to be the kind of man who doesn't just admit his mistakes, but helps repair what he damaged. Zoe looked at him long and hard. Then she opened the folder. Inside was a proposed contract. $5 million in startup funding, full operational control, terms that looked almost too clean to be real. She read for 2 minutes in silence, then looked up. This is well written. Nathaniel nodded. I had the top lawyers draft it. And it's generous. It's deserved. She closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. No? Nathaniel froze. No? Zoe leaned back against the bench, arms crossed. I don't want your money. He blinked. I don't think you understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, she cut in. You're trying to make it right. Good for you. You saw a moment to be better. I respect that. But I've worked for everything I have, Nathaniel. I built this from the floor up without a single handout. This isn't a handout, he said. It's a partnership. No, she said. It's a shortcut, one you think I need. His jaw tightened. You said you wanted to build something. I'm giving you the means. And I said I wanted to build it on my terms, she said, not off the guilt of a billionaire trying to fix his image. Nathaniel's mouth opened, then closed. Zoe took a step closer, not angry, just firm. Let me be clear. I'm not mad at you for offering. I actually believe you mean it. But my integrity? That's the one thing I've protected more than any car I've ever fixed. He looked down, ashamed. I just thought. You thought money would fix it, she said gently. But it won't. What will fix it is doing what you do best: systems, strategy, influence, and using that to lift the entire industry, not just fund one woman's dream to check off a box. She picked up the folder again, held it between 2 fingers. I don't want this. But I'll tell you what I do want. Nathaniel looked up. Make the Zoe Standard a required framework for your next round of executive hires. Use your platform to promote Black women engineers. Fund scholarships. Not in my name. Quietly. Without press releases. Just because it's right. She handed him a sticky note from her desk. A website URL. My friend Maya runs a nonprofit that trains young girls in STEM. You want to help? Start there. Nathaniel took the note. Read it twice. And then he smiled. This time, for real. You're extraordinary, he said. I know, she replied. Took you long enough. He stood, folder still in hand, now symbolic of a deal he'd never close. But something about the no felt clarifying. Zoe had said it without malice, without ego, just clarity. And for a man who spent his life building empires out of contracts and yes men, hearing someone tell him no with dignity felt like the first true moment of connection he'd had in years. He walked to the door, paused. "You ever change your mind?" "I won't." He nodded, still smiling. "Then maybe I'll just change mine." He left. Zoe watched him go, heart steady. The old version of her might have panicked, thinking she'd just walked away from the opportunity of a lifetime. But this version? She knew exactly what she'd done. She hadn't walked away from power. She defined it, on her own terms. And the world? The world was watching. The Ferrari was silent. It sat in its glass case on the 42nd floor of Nathaniel Westbrook's penthouse, untouched since Zoe calibrated its soul back into harmony. No one drove it, no one cleaned it, it just sat there. Nathaniel stared at it, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, scotch untouched beside him. Outside, the Manhattan skyline sparkled like a million curated distractions, but inside there was only stillness. He leaned forward on the armrest, elbows on his knees, and whispered to no one. "Why does this feel familiar?" Then, like breath fogging up a memory, he was back. Flashback. Stamford, Connecticut. 1992. He was 6. Curled into the corner of his father's study, knees drawn to his chest, too afraid to cry. The shattered laptop screen on the oak desk still blinked erratically, a result of Nathaniel's too curious fingers and a screwdriver he wasn't supposed to touch. All he'd wanted to do was look inside, understand. His father stood over him, stiff in a charcoal suit, disappointment radiating like heat. "Do you know how much that cost?" Nathaniel looked up, lip trembling. I wanted to see how it worked." "You broke it." "I was trying to fix." "Trying isn't good enough." Those words, they hit harder than the thunder outside. His mother didn't intervene. She never did. Flashback. Mid-lecture hall, 2007. Nathaniel, now 21, sat in the front row of an artificial intelligence seminar, hand raised halfway before lowering it again. Across the aisle, a professor praised another student for an idea Nathaniel had suggested minutes earlier, only louder. He clenched his jaw and said nothing. He'd learned by then that silence was safer, that praise came not from passion, but from performance. A text lit up on his screen. "You're doing great. Remember, finish the race. No emotion, no detours." "Dad." Nathaniel typed back, "I got it." He didn't. Not really. He just knew the formula. Work hard. Don't show weakness. Win. Flashback. Westbrook Dynamics HQ, 2013. Nathaniel walked into a boardroom full of men twice his age. They didn't stand, didn't smile, just nodded and waited to see if the boy genius would fall apart under pressure. He didn't. He wowed them with projections, patent locks, market leverage. His mind was a machine, and that day he used it like a scalpel. But afterward, alone in his office, he stared at his reflection and felt nothing. Not pride, not joy. Just the quiet whisper of a voice that always asked, "Was that enough? Are you enough?" Now, in the present, Nathaniel sipped his scotch and closed his eyes. Zoe had stirred something he didn't want to name. Not because it hurt, but because it was honest. She saw right through him. Not the billionaire, not the boardroom shark, not the name printed on IPO banners. She saw the little boy who once broke a laptop trying to learn. And she didn't flinch. He stood and crossed the room to the massive bookshelf in his office. There was one photo hidden behind a row of investment biographies. He pulled it out. It was old and faded, him at 15, greasy and beaming next to a '65 Mustang he and his father had restored together, the only project they ever truly shared. He remembered the way they'd stayed up late tuning the carburetor. The only time his father ever said the words, "I'm proud of you." But even then, it had come with a price. "You did good," his father said. "Don't get soft about it." Nathaniel had nodded. stuffed the emotion down, sealed it behind ambition. Back then, perfection wasn't a goal, it was survival. Love came in conditional terms, recognition came only after conquest. So, he'd conquered. And now? Now he stood at the top of the world, with an empire in his hands, and no one to share it with. Because somewhere along the climb, he traded intimacy for control, empathy for efficiency, connection for status. And then Zoe Langston had walked into his world, hand-stained, spine straight, and called his bluff with nothing more than the truth. He sat again, pulled out his tablet, and opened a blank note. Then began typing. A new initiative. Not just for Zoe, but because of her. The Langston Project? A venture to fund technical education and leadership pipelines for Black women in engineering. Not branded, not performative, no ribbon cuttings or camera crews. Just action. Because for the first time, Nathaniel Westbrook wasn't trying to win something. He was trying to unlearn. Later that night, he walked back into the garage and placed the old photo of the '65 Mustang on the wall above the Ferrari. It didn't match the clean lines or the minimalist decor, but it belonged. Because so did the boy who took it. He'd just forgotten that. Until someone reminded him. Someone who refused to shrink in his shadow. The event was called Innovate Her. Sponsored by 3 major tech firms and a prestigious think tank, the national competition had one simple goal: spotlight the next generation of women redefining STEM. Zoe hadn't planned on entering. Her schedule was full, her shop was slammed, and the last thing she wanted was to play dress-up for corporate America's idea of diversity. But Maya, her best friend, mentor, and part-time troublemaker, had other plans. "Zoe," she said, arms folded across her chest during one of their late-night phone calls, "you talk about changing the system. This is your shot to show it how it's done in public." Zoe sighed. "These events aren't built for people like me. They're built for clean resume and polite smiles." "And what if you're the one who changes that?" Maya pressed. "You've got the brains, the hands, the story. Make the system uncomfortable. Be the disruption." The next morning, Zoe submitted her application. 2 months later, she stood backstage at the Innovate Her National Finals in Boston, wearing navy blue coveralls with her last name stitched in bold gold thread. 12 women had made it to the final round. Most came from tech startups or Ivy League labs. Zoe was the only one with calluses on her hands and grease under her nails. Her final submission? A portable modular engine system designed to retrofit gas-powered cars into low-emission hybrids, especially in underfunded communities where EV adoption was unrealistic. The prototype was made in her garage, using spare parts, raw intuition, and long nights fueled by cheap coffee. Now, she stood behind her work, shoulders back, chin lifted. When her name was called, she walked out into the light. Meanwhile, Nathaniel watched from the 3rd row. He hadn't announced his attendance. No press, no entourage, just a simple black suit and a badge that read Industry Observer. He didn't come to be seen. He came to see. The last time he'd watched Zoe work, she was fixing his car. Now, she was fixing the future. Zoe stepped to the mic. "My name is Zoe Langston," she began. "I'm a master hybrid technician from Brooklyn. I'm not here to pitch a startup or talk theory. I'm here to show you a machine that could change lives not in 5 years, but today." She moved aside and began the demo. Within 5 minutes, the judges were leaning forward. Within 10, they were nodding. By the end, 2 were whispering to each other in amazement. "This system," she said, gesturing to the compact unit beside her, "can reduce carbon output by 42% for vehicles built before 2010. It costs less than $700 to install and can be serviced by a trained tech in under 2 hours." Silence. Then applause. Thunderous. Real. Zoe didn't smile yet. She just stepped back and let the work speak. Backstage, the other finalists patted her on the back. "That was insane," said one. "You didn't pitch, you preached." Zoe exhaled, finally grinning. "Guess I had a sermon in me." At the awards ceremony, Zoe didn't expect to win. She'd already gotten what she came for, to take up space on her terms in a room that didn't know what to do with someone like her. But when they announced first place, Zoe Langston, she froze, just for a second. Then Maya's voice echoed in her mind. Be the disruption. She walked to the stage and accepted the glass plaque with a quiet, grateful nod. Her acceptance speech was short. To every girl who's ever been talked over, looked past, or mistaken for the assistant, this is for you. After the ceremony, Zoe found herself by the coffee station, away from the flashbulbs. That's when she heard the voice behind her. You always that smooth with soldering tools and words? She turned. Nathaniel. No bodyguards, no suit and tie armor, just a quiet presence and honest eyes. Zoe raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you here. I didn't come for press, he said. I came to learn. And? He stepped closer, genuinely curious. I've spent my entire career looking for minds that could shape the future. Turns out, one of them was standing in my garage the whole time. Zoe chuckled. You're just figuring that out? Nathaniel smiled. Let's say I'm catching up. There was a pause, one that felt less like tension and more like understanding. You crushed it up there, he said. Not just technically, you taught something. You shifted the room. Zoe shrugged, sipping her coffee. I don't need rooms to like me. I just need them to listen. He nodded, serious now. I listened. Another pause. Is that scary for you? She asked. Nathaniel didn't flinch. It was, but now it's kind of a relief. Later, as Zoe packed up her prototype, a group of young girls from a local robotics team approached her. Miss Langston, one asked shyly, can we ask you some questions about your engine? Zoe grinned, kneeling beside them. Only if you promise to tell me about your next invention. Nathaniel watched from a distance. Not out of pride, out of respect. Because, for the first time, he wasn't seeing Zoe Langston as a rival, a reminder, or even a redemption story. He saw her for what she truly was, a leader. The crowd gathered like a pulse beneath the Manhattan skyline. Journalists, influencers, investors, and car enthusiasts packed the outdoor launch pavilion for the unveiling of Westbrook Dynamics' latest innovation, the Axiom 1, an AI-integrated, all-electric performance vehicle aimed at competing with Tesla and Lucid. Months of hype had built to this single moment. The stage glowed. The LED walls pulsed with countdown graphics, and in the center, draped beneath a shimmering silk sheet, was the 3.2 million prototype. Cameras panned, drone footage hummed above, tech blogs posted live updates. In the front row, Zoe Langston adjusted her sunglasses and kept her arms crossed. She hadn't planned to attend, but Maya called the night before. Westbrook invited you personally. You should go. Why? Zoe asked flatly. Because the world thinks he's changed. Might be good for them to see who changed him. Backstage, Nathaniel paced. His jaw tight, voice calm but clipped. He gave final notes to his engineers. The launch had to be perfect. No glitches, no delays. The Axiom wasn't just a carrot, was a symbol, a turning point. The embodiment of everything Westbrook Dynamics now claimed to stand for: sustainability, accessibility, equity. The pressure was surgical. Then the countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2. The silk cover pulled back in a single dramatic sweep, and the crowd gasped. The Axiom 1 gleamed under the lights like a panther forged from chrome and silence. Smooth, sculpted, futuristic. Nathaniel stepped forward, mic clipped to his collar. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, welcome to the next revolution in motion. Applause. The next 5 minutes went smoothly. Until they didn't. As Nathaniel wrapped up the demo and cued the live driving sequence, something in the car hiccuped. A flicker, barely visible to the untrained eye. But Zoe saw it immediately. The heads-up display inside the windshield blinked red for a millisecond, then flicked back to blue. To the crowd, nothing seemed amiss. But to Zoe, that flash screamed trouble. Then came the sound, faint but unmistakable, a soft rhythmic clicking from beneath the undercarriage. Zoe stood up. "Something's off," she said under her breath. A beat later, the Axiom's wheels began to spin for the autonomous demo run. Except it feared. Just slightly, but enough. The car jerked 5 degrees off its programmed path. Gasps from the VIP section. A scream from a drone operator. Nathaniel froze. "Abort sequence," he said into his headset. "Override now." But the system didn't respond. The Axiom kept rolling straight toward the edge of the platform where tech analysts, reporters, and brand partners were seated. Panic began to ripple through the crowd. Security guards rushed forward. And in that split second, Zoe was already moving. She sprinted down the side of the platform, her bag slung over her shoulder like a weapon. By the time she reached the vehicle, it had hit 15 miles fast enough to cause damage if it rolled off the edge. Zoe didn't shout. She dropped to her knees and reached underneath the front axle, her fingers feeling for the emergency kill switch relay. Most engineers mounted it in predictable places. Not her. She thought beyond predictable. She knew how engineers thought, and more importantly, she knew how they overlooked safety for Flash. "Come on," she muttered. The Axiom kept moving. 2 more seconds, 1 foot from the edge. Then click. The car jolted. The systems blinked. Silence. The wheels stopped dead. Zoe stood up slowly. Crowd, speechless. Then applause. Wild, explosive, real. Nathaniel was already off the stage, pushing past his assistant. He reached Zoe just as security swarmed. "You okay?" he asked breathlessly. She nodded. "Car isn't. I think your primary AI override failed. Your fallback relay wiring is non-redundant. Whoever built this didn't expect it to ever need human intervention." He let out a laugh, half in shock, half in awe. "You just saved the launch." Zoe looked at him deadpan. "And your liability insurance." An hour later, after media had scattered and PR reps swarmed Zoe with microphones and questions she didn't care to answer, Nathaniel found her sitting near the back, sipping bottled water like she'd just fixed a leaky faucet. "Looks like you're the hero again," he said. She didn't smile. "I'm not interested in being a hero. I'm interested in people not building dangerous machines with God complexes." Nathaniel chuckled softly. "Fair." He sat beside her, quiet for a moment. Then, "Would you consider consulting on the Axiom team as a system safety lead?" Zoe turned toward him, skeptical. "You offering me a job?" "No," he said. "I'm offering you authority, the kind that comes with veto power." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "I won't insult you by saying it's your call," Nathaniel added. "It should have been your call in the first place." She considered, then stood up and handed him her card. "I don't need a title, I need a voice. If you're serious, put me in the room before it breaks." Nathaniel took the card. Deal. The next day, headlines exploded. Mechanic turned, miracle, engineer saves, 3.2M car at launch. Zoe Langston stops AI glitch mid, demo public applauds. Westbrook tech crisis averted by woman who once touched his Ferrari. And Zoe? She returned to her garage. The spotlight didn't define her. The work did. But now finally the world saw what she always knew. That her hands didn't just fix engines. They built legacies. Nathaniel stood outside Zoe's garage. No cameras, no entourage, no folder of contracts tucked under his arm, just a man with both hands in his coat pockets, rehearsing lines he had rewritten in his head 100 times. He didn't come here to pitch, or plead, or pretend. He came here for one reason only, to apologize. Really apologize. Not the kind you give to the media. The kind that costs something. Inside, Zoe was finishing up a repair on a Ford Fusion's hybrid cooling system. Sweat on her brow, music low. Her dog-eared copy of Systems Thinking for Rebels sat open on the desk beside her. She didn't look surprised when she saw him walk in. Didn't even flinch. Just leaned over the hood and said, "You're early." I figured your kind only apologizes on quarterly schedules. Nathaniel managed a half smile. I came because I realized something important. Oh? She replied, keeping her eyes on the engine. That the woman you once yelled at on the street now runs circles around your engineering department? No, he said, that I've spent my whole life mistaking control for character. Zoe finally looked up. That caught her attention. Nathaniel took a deep breath. I've given 100 apologies in my life, most of them rehearsed, crafted by PR, designed to dodge liability. He paused. But this one's different, because it's not about saving face, it's about owning failure. Zoe tilted her head. Go on. Nathaniel stepped closer, slow and deliberate. I was wrong when I judged you. Not just that day, but the system I represent that I built was wrong. It's built to make people like me feel like gods and people like you fight for space we should have shared from the start. Zoe didn't blink. Nathaniel continued. You told me to let my actions speak. I've been trying to, but there's one thing I haven't said, and it's this. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. Solid. Earnest. Unprotected. Zoe leaned against the workbench. It took her a moment to respond. You don't get points for finally doing what you should have done, she said softly. I know. But, she added, you do get respect for not doing it with a camera crew. Nathaniel smiled. Small, but real. Progress. They stood in silence for a moment, the whir of a cooling fan filling the room. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This isn't money, he said quickly. No contracts, no offers, just something that felt overdue. She opened the envelope. Inside, a single handwritten note. Zoe, you taught me that leadership isn't about being right first. It's about listening long enough to understand what right even means. Thank you. N. Zoe read it twice, then tucked it into her back pocket without a word. Nathaniel cleared his throat. I also came here to ask you something. Zoe raised an eyebrow. I've spent years mentoring young execs, he said. Brilliant minds, but too many of them end up copying my worst habits, chasing power without purpose. I don't want that anymore. So, what are you saying? She asked. I want to step back, he said, from the spotlight, from the boards, not completely just enough to make space. For who? Hemeterchaza. For people like you. Zoe crossed her arms. I don't need you to make space for me, Nathaniel. I've already carved my own. I know, he said, but there are 1,000 others like you still locked outside the room. I can hold the door open. That's my job now. She studied him. This wasn't the man who'd barked at her in the street. This was someone else. Or maybe someone finally shedding the armor he'd never needed in the first place. You still think mentorship is a one-way street? She asked, narrowing her eyes. He shook his head. Not anymore. Because I don't need another teacher, she said. I need collaborators, co-conspirators, partners who aren't afraid to unlearn. I can do that. She looked him over once more, then nodded. Okay, but on my terms. Of course. No panels, no platitudes, and no treating me like a redemption story. You're not, he said. You're the reason I finally have one. They stood again in quiet understanding. Two people from different worlds who, somehow, had come to the same place. The edge of ego. The start of something better. The middle of becoming. As Nathaniel turned to leave, Zoe called after him. One condition. He paused, looking over his shoulder. I get the final say on any mentorship program you start. He grinned. Deal. And if you mess it up, she added, I will come back here, rebuild your Ferrari's engine and charge you double. Nathaniel chuckled. Fair. Back in his car, Nathaniel sat behind the wheel and stared at the horizon. No longer as a man needing control, but as one finally learning to let go. He didn't need to be the hero. He just needed to make room for better ones. And now, he had. 3 months later, Zoe stood at the podium in a sunlit atrium filled with engineers, students, mechanics, journalists, and dreamers. Behind her, a glowing sign stretched across the wall in bold, unpolished steel letters. The Zoe Standard Initiative, redefining who leads the future of tech. The audience had grown quiet. Phones hovered in the air, but Zoe didn't flinch under the spotlight. If anything, she stood taller because this time, she wasn't there to prove herself. She was there to build something that would outlive her. Innovation, she began, isn't just about who has the best lab or the most money. It's about who gets the chance to try. She paused, scanning the room, eyes landing on a group of teenage girls wearing jumpsuits that matched hers. For too long, the people fixing things weren't invited to design them, but today, that changes. Applause. Flashes. A few quiet tears in the front row. Every student in this program, Zoe continued, will learn hands-on skills, financial literacy, engineering ethics, and how to say no to deals that don't serve their power. This isn't charity, it's strategy. Standing ovation. Later that day, Zoe walked through the newly finished workshop, the heart of the initiative, with her toolbox slung over one shoulder and her work boots leaving a trail of sawdust. Young interns hustled around her, wiring simulators, logging diagnostics, debating voltage versus efficiency. She watched them with quiet joy. She had built this. No fancy investors. No watered-down vision. Just grit, truth, and a tribe of believers. She was tightening a terminal block on one of the training EVs when she heard a familiar voice behind her. You know, for someone who didn't want attention, you sure built a pretty loud legacy. She turned, wiping her hands on her coveralls. Nathaniel Westbrook. Hair a little longer, tie nowhere in sight, a bouquet of wildflowers in one hand, and a slightly nervous smile on his face. Zoe raised an eyebrow. Did you get lost again, CEO? He stepped forward, holding out the flowers. No, I came here on purpose. She took them hesitantly, but didn't roll her eyes this time. I'm impressed, she said. They're not roses. He grinned. I asked Maya what you'd hate least. She said sunflowers and snapdragons. She wasn't wrong. They stood in the sunlight, surrounded by the buzz of the future being built. Nathaniel looked around. This place, he said, is exactly what the industry needed, even if it didn't know it yet. Zoe shrugged. Told you I didn't need your money, just space. And you made your own. A beat. Then, but now I want to offer you something else. She narrowed her eyes. If it's another job. It's not, he said quickly. I swear, it's not even business. She folded her arms, smirking. Okay, now I'm really suspicious. Nathaniel rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly less sure of himself. I've spent years trying to fix everything but myself. Then I met someone who didn't want to be fixed, just seen, and once I saw her, I couldn't unsee her. Zoe didn't speak. He swallowed. I'm not here to make a grand gesture or get a headline. I'm just asking if maybe, after everything, after the engine, the stage, the near disaster, the launch, you'd let me take you to dinner. She blinked. Once, slowly, then smiled just a little. Are you asking me out, Westbrook? I am, he said. No strategy, no spin, just me. She stared at him for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. He blinked. Okay? Dinner, she repeated, but only if I pick the place. Nathaniel raised both hands. Done. And if you try to impress me with some rooftop restaurant and a wine list written in Latin, I won't, he promised. You'll be the only thing I'm trying to impress. Zoe chuckled, shaking her head. Damn, you really have been unlearning. He smiled. I had a good teacher. That night, they sat on a park bench in Queens with takeout containers between them, Korean BBQ and greasy kimchi fries. Nathaniel ditched his dress shoes for sneakers. Zoe wore her hair loose for the first time in weeks. They talked about the little things, about the things that matter, about what's next. He didn't try to save her. She didn't try to test him. And somehow, that was enough. The city buzzed around them, But the moment was quiet. Zoe leaned back, watching the skyline. "You know," she said, "I never wanted to be a symbol." Nathaniel looked at her. "You're not," he said. "You're a standard." She smiled, not out of pride but peace. "Good answer," she said. "You might earn that second date." He grinned. "That was a test, wasn't it?" "Of course it was." They both laughed. And just like that, without noise or headlines or hashtags, they closed the distance between two worlds. Not as mechanic and mogul, not as cautionary tale and comeback story, but as equals. Finally, what does it mean to be seen? Not just noticed. Not just watched when the spotlight finds you, but truly seen for your skill, your voice, your grit, your worth. For too long, people like Zoe Langston have lived in the blind spots of power. They are the ones who keep cities moving while the world looks the other way. They are the minds reshaping industries from garages and basements, not boardrooms. They are the hearts that don't chase praise but who command it through excellence alone. Zoe didn't ask to be a symbol. She didn't need a stage to validate her brilliance. She didn't bend to pressure, compromise her truth, or trade her dignity for $1. She stood. And when the system tried to fold her, she tightened the bolts, recalibrated her purpose, and turned the moment into a movement. This wasn't just a story about a car. This was a story about misjudgment and correction, about power and the courage to wield it with humility, about gender and race and how often we use titles as excuses to ignore talent, about ego and how much it costs to let it go. Nathaniel Westbrook had everything: money, status, control. And yet, the first real transformation in his life didn't come from his billions. It came from a woman who told him the truth without apology. A woman who didn't scream to be heard. She simply let her work speak. And the world listened. Let's talk about the Ferrari. Because that moment, the one that sparked all this, was never about a car. It was about perception. A billionaire saw a black woman in stained overalls and assumed she didn't belong. He made her small in public, dismissed her without knowing her name, tried to protect his machine without realizing the real asset was the person standing in front of him. But Zoe? She didn't cower. She didn't retaliate with rage or retaliation. She looked at the engine. She told the truth. And then, hours later, she proved that truth with her hands, in front of everyone. And what happened next? What happens every time the world is forced to reckon with underestimated brilliance? They tried to make her a moment. But Zoe became a movement. The internet exploded. People cheered. Articles were written. Podcasts recorded. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know, who is Zoe Langston? But Zoe didn't need them to write her story. She already had one. Written in oil stains, long nights, failure, persistence, and purpose. So she turned down the money. Turned down the performative apologies. Turned down the easy redemption arcs. And she chose something harder and holier. Integrity. That's what this story is really about. What happens when you choose principle over platform? What it means to lead without waiting for permission. What real growth looks like, not the viral kind, but the slow, steady, soul-deep kind. What it means when someone who once looked down on you finally looks up because they've learned to. Zoe didn't need saving. She became the standard. So here's the part where we turn this story into your story. Because this isn't just about Nathaniel, or Zoe, or a Ferrari, or a flashy launch gone wrong. This is about you. Whether you're watching this as a mechanic, a manager, a CEO, a student, or someone still figuring it all out, ask yourself, where have I misjudged brilliance because it didn't look how I expected? Where have I benefited from systems that silence voices like Zoe's? What would it take to shift my definition of leadership? When was the last time I really listened not to respond, but to understand? We live in a world where it's easy to talk about inclusion, equality, and representation. Harder to live it. Harder to surrender the seat. Harder to admit we got it wrong and still choose to stay in the conversation. But that's exactly where the real work begins. If this story moved you, if it challenged something in you, don't let that stop here. Make it ripple. Start the conversation with your team, your students, your circle. Tag someone who needs to see what growth really looks like. Share this video with your community, and not for clout, for clarity. Leave a comment below telling us, what moment hit you hardest? What would you have done in Nathaniel's shoes? Have you ever been a Zoe? Or needed one? This isn't about guilt. It's about growth. It's about holding space for truth without turning away from discomfort. It's about being okay with being wrong, because being wrong is where the right can finally start. To every woman watching who's been told to stay quiet, we see you. To every Black creator, engineer, builder, fixer, leader who's had to earn respect 10 times over just to stand where others were handed the mic, you are not behind. You're just undeniable. To the Nathans of the world still figuring it out, don't just post about change. Invest in it. Hire for it. Step back for it. Make room for it. And finally, to everyone who's been dismissed, underestimated, or passed over, let this be your reminder. You don't need the spotlight to shine. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need their permission to matter. You are not a footnote in someone else's story. You are the engine. You are the story. You are the revolution. So keep building. Keep speaking. Keep showing up in the rooms they said you didn't belong in. And when the world finally catches up, let your silence speak as loud as your skills ever did. Because the most powerful thing you can ever be is exactly who you already are. Like, share, comment below, and let's keep rewriting the definition of excellence together. Because the Zoe Standard, it's not coming, it's already here.